Well, welcome everyone to our Friday, May 29th, all-member call here with the Olathe Chamber of Commerce. Today, we will be having a federal update and everything that is happening in Washington, D.C. A few housekeeping issues before we get started. This call will be recorded so that if you're unable to join us for the entire call, please access our resource page and we will have the entire call uploaded sometime late next week. If you are on the call this morning and you have questions for our speaker, please type them in on the question and answer portion of this presentation. And Susie Carson here with our office will provide that to our speaker. We are very happy today to have a sponsor for today's call. That is Comcast Xfinity. Comcast has been a wonderful member with the Olathe Chamber for decades. And we are lucky to have on this call with us today the Director of Sales and Marketing for the Greater Kansas City area, Nicole Jacobson. Nicole, please introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining the call this morning. And we're just so grateful to the Olathe Chamber's efforts to support our first responders through the Frontline Fund, and just honored to be a part of that work. So I'll share with you just a couple of things before I introduce Senator Moran with us this morning about what Comcast Xfinity is doing in the community. And so as the country continues to manage through the COVID-19 emergency, we recognize that Comcast plays such an important role in helping our customers stay connected, their families, to their workplaces, their schools, and the latest information about the virus. Through the power of the internet, that connectivity matters more now than ever, and we're doing all that we can to deliver the most accessible and reliable internet and experience possible. Some things that we're doing for the community is on March 13th, Comcast actually announced a number of steps for our customers to make it more easily to work from home, access to educational resources, obtain important government healthcare alerts, stay in contact with families during these difficult and challenging times. These policies were originally intended to only last about 60 days, but as COVID has extended, we've also extended these through June 30th. What this includes is free internet essentials to customers for the first 60 days, Xfinity Wi-Fi for free for everyone, pausing our data plan, no disconnects or late fees, and adding additional free education information content on our X1 platform. These extended measures will help keep Americans safe and ensure that households are equipped for learning and staying informed at home as we deal with the unprecedented disruption to our daily lives. Our services have never been more important, and we're doing everything that we can to keep people connected. As you guys know, we have our local Xfinity store, which many of you, thank you so much, came out. It's great to see so many familiar faces came out when we opened that store back in January. And now we're reopening again. We had temporarily shut down for safety concerns during COVID. We're going to be reopening on June 8th. And with that, we just want to make sure we make you aware of some things that we're doing to keep employees and our customers safe. So we have reduced store hours from 11 to 6 is the window. And what this does is it gives accessibility to customers and some flexibility for employees. And then we transition to critical services, very similar to many other folks in the market. And what we're really trying to do is put more focus on the safety and well-being of employees and customers. So what this means for you as a customer is providing the most critical needed services at the store, such as equipment transactions, bill pay kiosks, and ordering any kind of mobile devices or help that you need with that. We've implemented social distancing protocols for our employees that interact with our customers, and we're committed to upholding the highest standards of sanitation and cleanliness in our retail stores, are using the methods that are recommended by public health authorities. All retail employees are required to wear facial coverings while working in the Xfinity stores, and we also require that all customer and store visitors wear a facial covering while entering the stores or taking advantage of the curbside services. Customers who don't have a facial covering will be offered a one-time disposable mask, and we are encouraging our customers who normally use the bill pay in the store to download the My Account app, and that gives them access to their bill 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they can also view balance, bill details, or make a payment. And without further ado, I will introduce U.S. Senator Jerry Moran, our speaker of the day. He has been serving the Kansas Senate since 2011, and during his time, he has been a champion for policies that increase the readiness of our nation's armed forces and improve veterans. Jerry and his wife and his two lovely daughters live in Manhattan, Kansas. And without further ado, I will turn it over to you, Senator Moran.
Nicole, thank you very much. And thanks to Comcast for hosting, sponsoring today's Chamber Hour. And we have a solid and good working relationship with Comcast and the folks in Washington, D.C., and appreciate their presence in Olathe and in Kansas. So please express my regards to your company and its associates. And to Tim and to Susie, thank you to the Olathe Chamber for allowing me to join you today. I'm told we were live as I was discussing earlier with Tim and Susie and Nicole that I got to get off Zoom because at least when I meet people, I don't have to watch myself. And I seem to have more gray hair and looking older all the time on these calls. But I'm honored and pleased to be with you. It's a privilege to represent Olathe and to try to make decisions in our nation's capital that are beneficial to you and to all Kansans. And I'm sorry for the circumstances that we are in right now with COVID-19 and the consequences and the response that's necessary to protect our health, but at the same time, maintain our economy. Before I make any additional remarks, I would first tell you that Alex Richard, my state director, is on this call. He's an Olathe resident, used to be my legislative director in Washington, D.C., and so is very knowledgeable. And if the questions become more than modestly level of difficulty, I'll quickly bring Alex into the conversation. But I look forward to having that conversation. I look forward to trying to respond to the things that you think I should know and to critique or suggest how we can do things better. Before I say a few more things than that and then turn it over to questions, again, thanks to the Chamber, but thank you also for Mayor Copeland joining us on this call this morning. And I'm pleased, I want to give the mayor a chance to say greetings to his constituents and to bring you up to date on anything that he as a city official and leader, part of the leadership of Olathe, would want you to know. It gives me also the opportunity to say that I'm in lots of places across Kansas and sometimes across the country. I'm involved in lots of chambers, and I wouldn't want to, the politician in me would not want to pick a favorite chamber. I wouldn't want to pick a favorite mayor, so I won't. But I can tell you that as citizens of Olathe, you have an outstanding set of leaders and a mayor that is highly regarded across the state and known as somebody who is so proficient in caring for the citizens and moving Olathe forward. And the chamber is a partner in that effort. And again, not picking chambers, Tim and Susie and the crew at the Olathe Chamber are just outstanding in what they do. And I know these are difficult times for the city of Olathe. It's difficult times for a Chamber of Commerce. And we want to be helpful in any way that we can. But Mayor, thank you very much for joining us. I would want you to have the opportunity to say hello to your constituents and do your mayoral duties.
Senator, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We know that you care a lot about our community in the state of Kansas, and we're so grateful that you even have your Northeastern Kansas office right here in Olathe. And Alex is such a great representative of you and is very, very involved in our community. We're grateful for Alex's leadership as well. One thing I can say immediately is I'm feeling like a hoarder looking at my bookcase compared to the bookcase behind you, Senator. I think I need to do some cleaning out here. But anyway, thank you for being here and for your extraordinary leadership in these difficult times and in other times. You have been a great, great friend of Olathe for many, many years and have been very, very helpful to us as we navigate Washington, D.C. and the federal government and as the city of Olathe interacts with federal agencies, and we're grateful for that. You know, these are tough times in Olathe, and I'm encouraging our residents to get out and support our local businesses here in Olathe. They provide many critical services, our shops, our restaurants, and various services to our community. We're grateful that they've hung in there, and it's rewarding to see such support from our Chamber of Commerce. You know, Senator, our Chamber of Commerce is the largest in Kansas City by membership and over 1,300 members. And Tim and his team have reached out to every single one of their members. Now, they haven't had a chance to talk live with every member, but they've reached out to them to get a sense of how our community is doing, how our business community is weathering these times, and grateful to Tim and his team. And once again, thank you for being here today, and appreciate your longstanding friendship with the city of Olathe.
Mayor, thank you, and thank you for allowing us to be at least in office, a professional resident of the city of Olathe, and thank you for your compliments of Alex. The bookshelf behind me, I'm in my office in Manhattan. We recently moved to the K-State Foundation building, and it is yet to be fully decorated, so people just keep putting things on these shelves behind me, so it looks like something is here. And if I was home, my shelves would look a lot more like yours, Mayor. And what I do notice as far as background is Alex Richard is behind him. Is a photograph of the Flint Hills taken by a National Geographic photographer from Kansas, from Lindsborg. And what it reminds me is, Alex, I think that's my photo, and I don't know why it's behind you and not behind me. So thank you, Mayor, for pointing out backgrounds I would not have otherwise noticed.
Sorry, Alex.
Look, as I said, I'm pleased to be here. There's lots of challenges. I generally think that what Congress has done in what I call 3.5 pieces of legislation, 3.5 phases. We passed 4 bills of significance related to COVID, a lot of smaller items, but the last being the CARES Act, and perhaps the most consequential. And I would tell you that in really most all of the instances that we are dealing with this topic, our legislation is designed to do, and I'm enough of a politician, know not to spend a lot of time bragging about government legislation and policies and programs. But I do think that, and you can correct me where I'm wrong, I do think some of the things we've done have been exceptionally beneficial to the business community and to restoring people's health and ability to return to work. And a lot of what the focus has been is trying to do both things, because I'm of the view that, let me say this, the taxpayers of this country, the borrowers that, or the taxpayers who are future taxpayers trying to pay back the borrowed money, the debt service, we can't afford to do all the things that are necessary to keep an economy going. We need the economy going. But to have a strong and growing economy, we need a level of confidence by our citizens, by people who own businesses and people who work at businesses, that it's okay to be out and about, that it's safe to do so, and that they're healthy. And so in all of my efforts, we're trying to take care of both by doing the things that increase the chances that we defeat the COVID-19 virus. And in the process of doing that, we don't destroy the economy. And in fact, we know that we need an economy to take care of health, and we know that we need good health to take care of the economy. The PPP program, which is probably the most prevalent part, and particularly for a chamber audience of the CARES Act, does both, in the sense that it allows individuals to stay on the payroll, but not to be physically at work, or even not to be working because they have a COVID circumstance in their own life, or in their personal life, or in their families, or they have a health risk. And so it is designed to make certain that people who need a paycheck don't have to be at the facility, at the plant, at the office, and they can recover their health and still have an income and put food on their families' tables. And while I was indicating that I think the things that we have done generally have been helpful to Kansans in this battle, I would tell you that this is out of character for me. I have voted for all 3.5 pieces of legislation. The half is because we were just funding things that we had previously done. In the last economic circumstance, the crisis of 2008 and 9, I voted against all 7 pieces of legislation that were bailing out the economy. I see this one as different, but I believe that the federal government spends too much money. I believe that we borrow too much money, and I believe that we're too all-encompassing in people's lives. And the things that we're doing in regard to COVID-19 all do those things: spend money and intrude in people's lives. And so philosophically, I have concerns with what we're doing. As a practical matter, we have, in my view, no alternative but to deal with COVID-19 and help people who are facing the circumstances that they're facing through no fault of their own. And so, again, this is not an easy thing for us to do, for me to believe that we have to do what we're doing. My goal is to make sure as COVID disappears that the level of spending that we are now involved in, when COVID is gone, the spending needs to go back down to where at least as low as where it was before we started down this process. I also would tell you that there are things in the legislation that are included that I'm not supportive of. I assume that's true of all 100 senators. But for example, these pieces of legislation have passed with near unanimity. The CARES Act passed 96-0 in the Senate. 96-0 in the United States Senate does not happen on a frequent basis. The divisions in our politics, the divisions in our country pull us apart, don't bring us together. And I saw this as a sign that in these challenging times, all of us were willing to set aside some of our objections to provisions in the legislation with the goal of passing something that at least I, and I assume 95 other of my colleagues, believed would be beneficial in addressing the challenges due to the pandemic that our country was facing. We were not well prepared. I think Americans, a natural reaction, the way we look at things is, this isn't going to happen here. This happened someplace else in a third world part of the country or third world part of the world. And Kansans in particular, I think, are skeptical about the things that will happen here. We think bad things happen someplace else on the coast. And surely we here in the Midwest are exempt from the challenges. And we're now in a position, I think, I'm happy to talk about the things that we have done, the things that we anticipate doing. I am away from Washington, D.C., home for the weekend. I'll return to Washington, D.C. on Monday. The Senate has been in session for the last 3 weeks, so I'm back to traveling back and forth. Sadly, for Kansas City, and I wouldn't personalize this, but the nonstop flights to Washington, D.C. to Reagan have disappeared. There were 5 a day, 2 Southwest, 2 American that no longer are available. I now fly through Chicago or Dallas or Charlotte. And but on my way home this last time, the plane was about half full. And the flight attendant told me that all the furloughed flight attendants for sort of an American Airlines flight were being recalled. Their furlough was coming to an end on July 1st. Gives me some suggestion that there is some economic activity occurring here, some economic recovery, which we're all looking for. I'm of the view that, as I said earlier, that we can't afford to bail out the economy. We need an economy. Therefore, I'm on the, I started to say I'm on the side. I hope there's not sides. I'm of the view, I'm working to see that we get to all the places that we need to be in opening up our economy, people back to work, out and about, as quickly as we can. And I don't think that's a decision, certainly not a decision that I will make. President Trump at one point in time thought it was his decision. Ultimately, I think he concluded it was the governor's decision. Now in Kansas, it appears that it's the county commissioners and county health department's decision, all of which I think is good. This is not a Washington, D.C. decision about the stay-at-home orders. It needs to be much more localized than that. We are not New York, so Kansas is not New York, but Johnson County is not Johnson City. Incidentally, that's a county seat town on the Colorado border of a few hundred, I should be better than that, 1,500 people. So we recognize the differences and we need to respond differently each place. But the overall goal that I'm about is trying to make sure I do the things that increase the chances that there can be more out and about, there can be more work at work, there can be classes in the classroom. One of my primary, I guess goals, the thing that we're working is, what can I do to make sure that the Olathe schools have classes in the fall? What can I do to make sure that their universities, our technical colleges, our K through 12 classes occur? I think it's a hugely important component to the education of our children, the education of our citizens. It's also an important component in the economy because we have a different circumstance with employment if our kids are at home and not in school. I also worry about the students, and while I have great regard for the teaching capabilities of our educators, we have, my view, I don't have any statistics to demonstrate this. I have conversations with school officials and educators. I don't think we can educate our students by distance learning to the well-being of the students as well as we can in a classroom. And if nothing else, there are lots of families, lots of kids who just need a teacher to give them a hug and tell them they love them. And we got lots of kids at home who are taking care of their brothers and sisters, little kids who, while their parents are at work. We've got to get to a point as best we can in a responsible way that society, the economy, our schools, our education system are open. And with Comcast hosting this, I would point out to you that for as long as you've allowed me to represent you, and a little bit before that, when a few others allowed me to represent them, we've been working on technology, trying to make sure that broadband services are available in the highest quality possible. And in my view, we've made a lot of progress in that regard. But this pandemic demonstrates that we have a long way yet to go to make sure that every family has access to telehealth and to teleeducation. And again, we're using those technologies widely today, but there's lots of people who are still slipping through the cracks. So my work is not over in regard to that. I think finally, I would say that, as I indicated, I'm on the freedom aspect of trying to get us to a different position than where we've been over the last month and a half. I want people to have more opportunities to do what they want. They can make decisions about some of the risks and what they can and can't do. But I would tell you that I talk to lots of people where they're ready to go. If President Trump announced today, or Governor Kelly or your county commissioners said it's free and open, there are plenty of people who would jump at the chance to be out and about. But I also would say there's lots of people who are still concerned about their health. Maybe they're caring for a child with difficult health circumstances, caring for elderly parents. There is still a doubt. And our goal over the last, and perhaps it's shifted a little bit, but they're related. First of all, getting PPE, personal protection equipment, to those who need it, our law enforcement, first responders, healthcare professionals, and others. And now getting testing more available where it would be of value, because the goal should be people who test positive should be isolated, not everyone. So again, there's a lot that we can do as we try to help this country and our state, your county, get to a point in which you feel comfortable being out and about and not worried about that you be bringing something home or causing harm to your colleagues at work. Tim, I don't know who I'm looking at or who's moderating here, but I'm happy to take this in the direction that you and your members want it to go.
Thank you, Senator. We have a couple of questions, and I'm going to let Susie go ahead and ask you a couple of those, and we'll just go from there, and if that's okay.
That's great, and I'm glad the mayor is still on. We'll bring him in on the difficult ones.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator. So the first question we have is about the Paycheck Protection Program and the Flexibility Act. Where do you see that legislating standing, and in reference to small businesses and the PPP forgiveness process that was recently released by the SBA?
Well, thank you for the question. It is a good one, and it's one that's on people's minds. So I doubt that there's anybody on the call who doesn't know what PPP is, although every time I say it, I have to stop and think, am I saying PPP or PPE? But this is the Paycheck Protection Program. It is a loan program guaranteed by the Small Business Administration. We chose this route. I mean, the premise of this is that a small business, less than 500 employees, can borrow money from their local financial institution, credit union, or bank. They can have that loan guaranteed by the SBA. And if they do certain things, mostly related to retaining or rehiring their employees, the majority of that loan can be forgiven. So it becomes a grant. And in many ways, it was intended to be a grant program. It was put together rapidly. I was making calls as we were debating what to do in Washington and calling business men and women, including one I won't mention by name, but one in Olathe, who just that day was telling me, I'm so glad you called, because today was the day I was going through the list trying to figure out how many people I could keep and how many people I had to let go. And if you actually are telling me that you think you're going to get something like this program you just described, PPP, passed, I'm not going to lay off anybody. I'm going to wait and give you the chance to get that passed. So we were about, and in the effort to do it quickly so that more people retained their jobs and more businesses didn't close, we didn't do it perfectly. And so It has been, I think, very helpful. There are some challenges with it. Initially, it was the computers. The SBA is an agency that normally does about $30 billion of business a year. We asked the SBA to do $350 billion in 2 weeks. And as soon as we got through the kind of technical glitches with the computer system, which took us about 2 or 3 days, and then we got through some challenges with sole proprietors and independent contractors, I think the program has worked as pretty well designed. But so that's the challenges early on. I'm getting to the question that you asked. The next challenge was that there were some companies, larger apparently, who weren't entitled to participate in the program that did. And there became this kind of political demand that companies give back the money. And then there was questioning about the program itself and whether the loan would be forgiven. And then we had companies that clearly were qualified that started giving back the money. And I regret that. So the uncertainty became pretty real for bankers and their borrowers. Are we really going to get this forgiven? And maybe it's a good Kansas trait is if it sounds too good to be true, it's not true. And we're not accustomed to free money and loans being forgiven. But this program was designed as a grant program, and loan forgiveness is a significant component of what we were doing intentionally. And I think we were successful in getting the question answered. In fact, if your loan is $2 million or less, we now have a FAQ answer, frequently asked question answer, that our team in Washington, D.C. kept beating on the door of Treasury and the SBA to answer. And there is a safe harbor that if your loan is less than $2 million, there is no intention to audit that effort and to give you a reassurance that you qualify, because the question the reason there's been skepticism about loan forgiveness is normally the SBA requires that they're the lender of last resort. We took that provision out of the law. We eliminated it. It's not necessary that they're the lender of last resort. You don't have to go to another borrower and be rejected. But there became concern that was the case and the loan wouldn't be forgiven. So we've had a number of hitches and uncertainty about this program. We think we've got a significant part of that answered, but now there are still challenges in the repayment program. The bill that the questionnaire asks about is something that passed the House yesterday. And it's something similar, a little bit broader than what the Senate has introduced. And I have the things in there that I think are important. In this case, I'm talking more about the Senate bill, but they have, in some ways, are identical. In other ways, there are some differences. But something like this, I think, will become law. It will be a blend of what the Senate has introduced, the Small Business Committee, Marco Rubio chairs, and what the House passed yesterday. And most importantly, in both provisions, it extends the amount of time in which which you can use your loan funds. In the case of the Senate bill, it's to 16 weeks instead of 8. So you don't have to have all your employees back. There's a reason, a flaw in the legislation that makes in some instances that difficult to do, but it gives you longer time to demonstrate that you're entitled to loan forgiveness from 6 to 8 weeks. It also extends the program till the end of the year. I think the question was, what do you expect to happen? I expect next week the Senate to take up the House bill and something similar to what the House has passed, something that's a little bit between what the Senate has proposed and what the House is doing, I think becomes the bill. And unless it takes unanimous consent for us to easily do any work in the United States Senate, assuming that no one uses this, in a sense, must-pass piece of legislation as leverage. I think it's one that happens quickly so that our borrowers can know they have more time to get their employees back on the payroll.
Thank you, Senator. Kind of a follow-up question to that. As far as the loan being forgiven, apparently there's a lot of calculations. Do you see any efforts where they might try to relax the rules on the calculations?
Yes, to make it more straightforward, to make the money to be able to be used for additional things. And in the case of the House bill, to reduce the percentage of the employment that has to be retained in order to qualify. So the overall, this legislation is designed to make the program easier, more adaptable to the circumstances that that borrowers are finding themselves in, and to move loan forgiveness along in a way that fits with the business's needs. Alex, you want to add anything particularly about the House side of this equation?
Yeah, Senator, I think you hit on the allowable expenses and just trying to reduce the amount of calculations that the SBA is doing right now. I think whatever bill comes out of the Senate and the House, which will be signed, will help reduce some of that calculations.
I mean, I don't know anything that's happening now that suggests that there's something bad in there. I mean, at this point, I think everything here is designed to do good. We don't always do good even when we intend to. But this all seems to be moving the program in a better direction for our small business men and women. And again, I think the outcome, because the desire to do that is so prevalent among members of Congress and the need is there, I think this is something that can happen quickly. And maybe this becomes phase 3 3/4.
Perfect. Our next question, and Mayor Copeland, this wasn't from you, of course, but you might be interested in this as well. As far as cities are concerned, have you heard anything about cities receiving something in the future?
I seem to give history lessons when I answer questions. They all have such components in how we get where we get to a conclusion about cities and counties. First of all, I mean, Johnson County was one of 2 Kansas counties that received about $100 million from the CARES Act. Only counties with population of 500,000 or more qualified. There were 2 in Kansas, Johnson and Sedgwick. And then every state was guaranteed to get $1.25 billion, less what went to those counties. So there's about $1 billion that rests, I don't know, with your legislators or your governor or both, as Kansas can spend on the costs associated with responding to COVID-19. So there is money that's already there. And I noticed in just what I read in the press that Missouri is dedicating 25% of their federally acquired money through the CARES Act to provide to cities and maybe cities and counties, but at least cities. I don't know what our plan is. And the reason again, starting back at a point, there is an opportunity here for Olathe and other cities to deal with the state of Kansas because the money that was provided to the state, and I don't know the facts sufficiently to say this is absolutely the case, but if you have over $1 billion and it can only be spent on the things that are associated with COVID expenses, not loss of revenue, I don't know that Kansas would have $1 billion worth of those expenses, which suggests to me that there's an opportunity. I'm not trying to meddle with Governor Kelly and her plans. I don't know what the circumstances are, but my point is that there is $1 billion in Kansas, $1 billion+ in Kansas that will need to be determined how it's spent, and some states are spending that on counties and cities. Secondly, I'm leading up to the answer, and part of that lead up is there's a significant amount of money that even if you weren't Johnson or Sedgwick County, money came to airports across Kansas, public health departments across Kansas, hospitals across Kansas, law enforcement across Kansas. So there are money coming to local units of government for local kinds of expenditures. I probably called 24 law enforcement officials, police chiefs and sheriffs in the last 3 weeks, telling them the good news that they've qualified for a CARES grant, including the Johnson County Sheriff. So we're doing things that are in addition to any kind of direct grant. I think what most cities are looking for now is, are we going to pay for loss of revenue? And I don't know the answer to that question. And as far as I have gone in my own thinking is, I am not interested in any Kansan paying for other states and localities outside Kansas who have mismanaged their financial resources over a long period of time, and unrelated to COVID, they are in financial problems. That is not the mistake of Kansas or its taxpayers, and they should not be responsible. I am still interested in finding ways of helping local units of government meet their public service needs to their citizens. And I think whether there is a grant program that goes directly to cities is a very significant political decision. You may have heard that the Republicans in the Senate, but particularly Senator McConnell, said we're not bailing out cities and counties. Mostly he said we're not bailing out states. But he also said I'm not supporting anything that doesn't include liability reform. And I think this is just my insight into the kind of the legislative process. This is the leverage moment in which if you want cities and counties to get direct aid, the members of Congress who oppose liability reform are going to have to give something on that issue. And I could see that becoming the give and take of the legislative process. If you want liability, we want liability reform. There are those who want more money to cities and counties. There's a compromise that could be had if we can reach an agreement on that. So I think that's, again, I didn't answer the question because I don't know the answer, but there will be a lot of interest in providing money to cities and counties. And I think there will probably be some program, at a minimum, something that is helpful towards city functions. It bothers me when I see that law enforcement officials being laid off or furloughed. We ought to be able to do some things to help cities make sure that they don't lose their basic services despite their loss of revenue. Mayor, what would you like for me to know about this question?
Well, Senator, you're correct. Johnson County has received just over $116 million from the CARES Act, and we are working with Commissioners Ashcraft and Brown to access a portion of that to fund the COVID fighting costs we have, including overhead and other expenses associated with that. We're up to around a little over $600,000 in direct costs in fighting COVID, and so hopefully we'll be able to see some success down the road.
Mayor and others, we're also, I think the primary thing at the moment before we reach the decision about are we going to provide money to cities and counties is can we create more flexibility so that the money that we've already provided counties and cities, no city in Kansas, but counties and cities across the country as well as states, can there be more flexibility so that the state or the city and county can decide better how it can be used? And I think that will happen, and I think that will be the first step toward providing more help to local units of government.
Senator, off of that question or off of what you just said, is there any plan or do you foresee another phase? You know, there's been a lot of discussion about the possibility of that. Do you, obviously there's a lot of things that could be tweaked or changed in regard to the current phase. Is there, could there possibly be an additional phase beyond what we've seen?
I mean, I would expect additional legislation. I don't know the magnitudes or whether it's called a phase or not. I don't know, but I would guess it is of significant magnitude. The problems that are still Americans are facing is still significant. Again, my caveat about we do not have the capability of bailing out everything when the economy is not at work. We need an economy that's functioning. But I think there is more to come I would say there is a quote phase 4, will be a quote phase 4. And you pointed out something, Tim, that we're working on. We've made some mistakes. There's people who are falling through the cracks. There needs to be another phase, at least to take care of the things that we didn't do well or didn't do right, or that have a less than necessary amount of resources. Fix the things that we've already done. I think when I struggle to say a yes or no answer to will there be a major, will we do significant dollars for cities and counties, or will there be a major phase 4? That's a hard question to answer. And in part, we want to see what we're doing, whether it's working, which makes sense to me, find out what we did wrong and what we did right. And then we're waiting to see, I think there's a reason to determine whether isolation worked, whether social distancing slowed the spread of the virus, and whether or not summer months reduces the spread of the virus. When we get a few days behind us in which people are back out again, do we see reoccurring problems? And if the answer to that is yes, then I think it's going to take more taxpayer-supported federal assistance than if isolation worked well and the virus is diminishing and summer months and sunshine and warm weather is on our side. So yet a number of things yet to be determined. Is what circumstance are we facing as we get back to something closer to normal?
Perfect. Thank you, Senator. Okay, we've got one more question about this, and then we're going to switch directions a little bit. The last question surrounding COVID. We have someone with us from the local workforce board that serves Johnson, Wyandotte, and Leavenworth counties. With the uptick in unemployed, there's also been a decrease in funding in WIOA funding. And the ticket, you know what that means. Do you see any federal dollars coming to the workforce system soon, either through additional WIOA dollars or through another funding source?
Did can you, I don't know whether you can ask the question, but so I don't know whether money came to WIOA in the phase. The way they asked the question suggests that it did not. But I know that there are workforce programs across Kansas who have received grants. So unless Alex can help me, he was intent on knowing what the abbreviations were that the questioner asked. Maybe what we need to do is if you would connect me or Alex with the questioner, and we'll have a conversation to make sure we understand the question and be helpful. I know, for example, in Wichita that their workforce training organization, employment, wish I could come up with the name of their specific organization, they've received CARES money. I think it is just for me to maybe answer the question about how I think there is value in us supporting education, retraining, workforce development at a time in which COVID-19 has put so many people on the unemployment line. And I see it, I mean, we're very involved in trying to support the aviation industry, for example. And we often in Kansas think of that as Wichita and South Central Kansas. It is hugely an important issue in Johnson County and in Olathe itself. And so anything that we can do to make sure that this highly trained, sophisticated workforce continues to exist. When this is behind us, we do not want to have lost all those people to someplace else. So we're working to make sure that's the case. But Alex and I will follow up if you can tell us who to follow up with.
Yes, absolutely. She did respond, and she said that there was no money given to WIOA, and in fact, it's been decreased a little bit for next year. So we'll definitely get that information and put you guys in touch. Go ahead.
I'm an appropriator. I hate to hold this out there. I'm a member of the Appropriations Committee. I serve on the Appropriations Committee that funds the Department of Labor. So we can have a conversation and I can learn from him or her whether there are things that would be beneficial that we ought to be pursuing.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Okay, next question goes a little bit a different way. It's about voting by mail. It seems there's been a lot of people, I know you've heard the conversations around this. Where do you guys stand as far as voting by mail? And go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Susie.
Yeah, it just said many Kansas voters have enjoyed voting by mail for some time. There seems to be a recent push by the administration to ban voting by mail. Where do you and your colleagues stand on this issue?
My view is that this is a lot less federal issue than sometimes it's made out to be by either those who like mail voting or those who don't. I think we're fortunate that voting is managed, handled, operated by states across the country. It is the Secretary of State that is responsible for fair and good elections in Kansas. It's your county election officer who is designed, the position is designed to make certain that we have the opportunity for people to vote. I'm of the view that people who are legally entitled to vote ought to be able to vote. I'm of the view that a mail voting has worked well in Kansas. It surprises me to say that. I'm a former state senator who voted against it. But I found it that people are I had this Norman Rockwell view of voting day, that we all ought to join hands and go to the polls together. And today's society, in the demands upon our time, the challenges of long lines and that kind of thing, has made advanced voting, ballot voting by mail, a very useful and valuable tool in Kansas. And I would try to make certain that Kansans make the decisions. Nobody in Washington, D.C. Would try to restrict our ability to vote the way that the Kansas legislature has decided we should vote and the way that Scott Schwab, the Secretary of State, is implementing. We've had conversations as a team with Scott about voting in Kansas, and we're trying to make sure that the things that we do in Washington, D.C. don't interfere with the way we vote today, which includes voting by mail.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is surrounding infrastructure. Do you see any movement happening on infrastructure spending, including technology, along with the roads and bridges?
I was smiling because I looked at the mayor, only to say that all infrastructure apparently takes place in Olathe. We are, I'm involved, have been involved on and off with about every committee that is involved in infrastructure spending. We often think about that, roads and highways and bridges and interchanges. And we're pleased to be able to help Kansas, the state of Kansas and its Department of Transportation, focus money from federal dollars on 135, 35 and 135th Street. And there is infrastructure that's taking, spending that's taking place now. There is talk about the next phase, to a bit of Tim's question about phase 4. The president, and particularly the Democrats in the House, are interested in an infrastructure bill as part of the stimulus to get people back to work. I had a conversation yesterday with a Kansan who was telling me that the way I took the conversation was that don't just do shovel-ready projects, that things that are in the works today that could be funded, yes, they might help a few jobs, some jobs being created today, but what our businesses need is long-term knowledge that there is money available for infrastructure over a decade period of time, so that construction companies are buying trucks and equipment and spending money that they wouldn't spend if they were just getting a contract, they were successful on a bid for a project that's over in 6 months. That was very useful for me to hear. I hadn't thought about it that way, but it makes a lot of sense to me. So there's an effort underway, again, particularly by the Democrats in the House and President Trump, that infrastructure become part of phase 4 or whatever the future holds. And my view is if we're going to spend money, we need to invest in infrastructure. And if we're going to spend money, now is a good time to spend it to help people get back to work and to help businesses succeed. So that possibility exists, and infrastructure is more than just roads, bridges. You mentioned technology, that's one of them. We've tried to make certain that whatever infrastructure bill we do of any magnitude includes what I said earlier about broadband, for example, but it's also airport runways and sewer projects, and it's wastewater treatment and clean water treatment plants, a lot of things that involve infrastructure. And this is one of those things to be determined, but it is a conversation that's taking place as we speak.
Senator, one last question. Is there lessons that we have from the COVID pandemic that we've learned and that we can use as we move forward?
Boy, absolutely. There are, and there should be. As I indicated earlier, I don't believe we were well prepared. The so-called stockpile hadn't been maintained. Many of the items that we stockpiled for this kind of circumstance were outdated, and it needs attention. I would also say that we under-resource normally our public health departments. Public health is generally a county business. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control, is also a contributor of finances to public health departments across Kansas and across the country. And my view is that we have paid too little attention to our county health departments and their ability to respond to this kind of circumstance. We ought to be better prepared. But one of my major takeaways, and it perhaps is an opportunity for the Olathe Chamber and your economic development officials in the city, I'm of the view that we no longer can afford to be reliant upon China or Honduras or any other country to meet our healthcare needs when it comes to vaccines, prescriptions, components of drugs, swabs, gowns, gloves. So we've tried so much to help communities, hospitals, public health departments, businesses get PPE, more recently getting tests. And particularly with PPE, the answer often has been, someone will call and say, well, we ordered from this company, gowns. We've been tracking them and they're sitting on a dock someplace at the Port of Los Angeles. Can you help us? And when we start down that process, one, customs has to clear that. And two, the FDA has examined the gowns that are sitting on the dock, and they don't meet US specifications. They don't meet our quality. So we've outsourced our supply chain in regard to a number of things, but especially in healthcare. And I'm of the view that that needs to return, and there's great opportunities for us. I also would say that particularly when it comes to China, they are often our adversary. I do not want the fate of Americans' health determined by political decisions or a communist party in China. And so bringing this work back home probably means a little more expensive. I mean, the reason the supply chain is what it is today is that things are manufactured more cheaply in China than they are someplace else. But I think it's worth the price to get our freedom from somebody being able to control our future when it comes to our health, our healthcare needs. So that's one of them. You know, a lot of the isolation, stay at home, and even the social distancing all started as we have to do this because our hospitals, our healthcare providers don't have PPE. We got to give them a chance to catch up so they can take care of themselves and take care of us when the time comes, if it comes. And think of what a different, perhaps, I don't know, think about this. How much different would this have all been if the hospitals had the tools that they needed when this thing started, and we weren't having to try to reduce the demand on their services by changing our ability to go to work. If we had the tools there, I think we would have handled this circumstance differently. And so that's a few of the takeaways that certainly, I suppose if I could, more philosophical takeaway, I have seen so many people do so many good things. There's a takeaway here that Americans, Kansans, the citizens of Johnson County and Olathe, when there's a problem, people respond and they do what needs to be done to get it done. And so if you need, a takeaway is that you can still rely upon most Americans to do the things that are necessary to make things work in good times and in difficult times. It does makes me feel awfully good. I was on a Zoom call with community leaders in Pittsburgh, and Mayor and Tim and Susie and others. The president of Pittsburgh State University was telling me his mentor told him that in times of crisis, that we should tell the truth. In times of crisis, we should have a plan, and in times of crisis, we should provide hope. And I've seen those circumstances by Kansans at every opportunity. It just makes you feel good that we do the things the way we do them. And we respond in ways that take care of our neighbors and our families, but people we don't even know. And I know it happens in Olathe.
Well, Senator, thank you very, very, very much for joining us today. And thank you for representing us. You've been a great friend to the Olathe Chamber and to the Olathe community. And, the infrastructure question that we received earlier, I know you've stepped up time and time again. Every time we've asked, and the return on those dollars that you've been able to help us with is wonderful, and thank you. And I will tell you, in regard to the PPE question, I know our CEO of our hospital is on listening in, and I'm sure he's very thankful for all your help in regard to helping us with that, and they've done a great job here and taking care of it. I know that they haven't been overwhelmed at all, and they're just a great partner with us as well too. So thank you, Senator. Thank you for everything.
Tim, two things, maybe only two. I'm pleased to know that the CEO of Olathe Medical Center has joined us today. He and I have we need to take, as soon as we can, the opportunity to get better acquainted. Olathe Medical Center is hugely important to the community and to the region. And Stan and I want to make certain that we are allies and that you know that. I bring a rural background to my life and to public policy, and every hospital in Kansas, whether it's rural or urban, struggles financially. We need to make certain that we don't lose a hospital. We've lost a number in Kansas already. And our goal in all of this is to make sure our hospitals have the resources, first, to take care of patients, to take care of Kansans, to take care of COVID. But secondly, to make sure that their long-term circumstances were not diminished by what they were having to do today. We lose a hospital in Kansas. I doubt that it ever returns. And they are so important to our community's future and your ability as a Chamber of Commerce to attract business and people to live there. So Stan, I am your ally. We don't know each other very well, but I'll work. You've tried and I've tried to get together, and we've failed. So thank you for what you do. Please express to the folks who work with you and for you how grateful we are for the risks they take to make certain that people are cared for. And I look forward to the day, and I hope that we're there, in which people are easily returning to Olathe Medical Center for healthcare services, because they need the revenue. And while we provided lots of money to healthcare providers, that can't continue ad infinitum. Our hospitals and clinics need to be back at work. And secondly, on regard to infrastructure, could you please not say anything to you and the mayor, not say anything to other mayors or to chambers of commerce like other communities in Johnson County, so that they don't hear you talking about the success that we've had in Olathe?
Well, I think our return has been pretty good. So thank you. Well, with that, thank you for spending time with us today. And I've heard that this might be your birthday. So I just want to say happy birthday. And I don't mean to put you on the spot. I know you may not enjoy that, but
it may be, and if it is, you're the first Zoom birthday wish that I've had. So thank you. Again, I was telling you earlier, I've got to get off Zoom because I have to see myself. The good news is I've had a haircut now. I didn't realize how white my hair was. I was telling the mayor the other day that despite the fact of graduating from the University of Kansas in the 1970s, I've had longer hair this week than ever before in my life, and finally, it's back to something more normal.
Well, thank you for spending time with us today, and appreciate it, and thank you for everything you do for us, Olathe and Kansas and DC, and we look forward to continuing this great relationship. Mayor, thank you for joining us, and Alex, and thank you for Comcast and Xfinity for sponsoring us today. And with that, I think we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Let us know how we can help.
Thank you, Senator. Have a great day. Happy birthday.
Thank you.